Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 2 of Knack TV. I'm your host Neil Malek. I've been a software trainer and professional development teacher for about 10 years now. And I started Knack training with two goals, one short-term, one long-term. My short-term goal is that every time you interact with me, here on the videos, Twitter, in person, that you get a little better at what you do. And long-term, I want you to be fantastic at what you do. I challenge you to take whatever you learn from this video, turn around, go back to work with it, try it out, and then come back, go down to the comments down below this video, let me know what worked and what didn't, and any other comments you happen to have about the show. This is week number 1, the war on bullet points. So we're again inside a Microsoft PowerPoint. We're trying to make our presentations more effective, more interesting, be something that people actually want to pay attention to. And this is episode number 2, entitled Charts. So in episode number 1, we took bullet points off the screen and we put them into our speaker notes, and then we decided to put some pictures on the screen. Now, in putting text into the speaker notes, what we allowed ourselves to do is still be able to remember what we wanted to say, remember the text of our argument, of our presentation, but we remember that Chris Atherton's research tells us that text on the screen and text that's coming out of our mouths both hit the same part of the brain. So what we want to do is we want the text to come out of our mouth and hit the auditory part of the brain, and we want something else on the screen that can hit the visual part of the brain. So we look at slide number 4 in our presentation and we see something that's a bunch of numbers. Now earlier we used pictures because honestly it was just some announcements, some interesting pieces of information, and we wanted the emotional attachment of being able to see the people that we were talking about. Now, in this slide, we have number values. And number values are kind of interesting because number values mean absolutely nothing out of context. To give you a quick example of that, let's say I told you I found $1, right? Well, there's one of two different possibilities here. I could say I found $1, open street, there's $1 laying on the ground, found money for me. Or you could say, well, there was a large pile of money laying there and I found $1 out of the whole thing. Obviously the $1 means nothing without the understanding of the context that it's in. I'm going to give you a couple more examples here. If I tell you that 2 of my salespeople earn $12,000 and $11,800, and then I say that a third of my salespeople earns $22,400, if you say 12,000, 11,800, and 22,400, just mentally you say to yourself, well, $22,400 is a pretty decent amount of money. It's definitely more than the 12,000 or the 11,800. But if I put that into a pie chart for you, all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a second, $22,400, that's almost half of our total revenue this month. Oh, well, obviously that one salesperson's really doing something quite important for us. Or if I said we have 4 million users, and those 4 million users get us $4 billion in revenue. Well, 4 million and 4 billion sitting next to one another, it's hard to see what the difference is between 4 million and 4 billion. But if I were to take a slide and then put our user on it, and then right next to our user to put the $1,000 that user contributed, all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense. Or if we were to make a little column chart and we said, here's 4 million and here's 4 billion, you could see exactly how much bigger 4 billion is than 4 million. So there's a lot that can be gotten from context here. So context is everything when it comes to numbers, and really the only way to show context is to give visuals of what you're talking about. So you look at the slide here and you see, okay, you've got 30 and 32%, you've got 2 and 4%, and all those numbers sort of float out there. And it's hard to see exactly how much different 32% is from 2%. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the text off the screen. While we're at it, we'll go ahead and paste that text into the speaker notes area again. And then what we can do is we can click on our Insert Chart button in the middle of the screen. What the Insert Chart button will let us do is go ahead and put some of our numbers in there. And so we'll put in our North and South America, our Asia and Europe numbers, and then put in the values. And once we've inserted the values into the Excel spreadsheet, we can then close this down and we see that the values show up in a chart. And, this is a lot better for showing the difference between these number values. And that's perfect. So right then and there you see that creating a chart to represent number values is always the right answer. When we don't have number values to work with, it's a good idea to add pictures. But when we want people to recognize the difference between two things, we have to really put visualizations of those two things side by side. And the best way to do that with numbers is charts. Now, this is a very, very good step. This is a very positive step. The step a lot of people just don't even take. But there's an even more important step that follows right after this. Because to be perfectly honest, when I look at this chart, I don't really know what I'm looking at. I see that two values are bigger than the other two values on this chart, but I still don't really get the context. I don't get the communication part of things that you want me to get out of this. So how is it that I'm going to make this chart better at communicating? I have to add certain elements of design to my presentation. Now, I know a lot of you guys watching this video are going to say, my job is the numbers. My job is actually doing something that people can look at and get the raw data out of, and I don't have the time to decorate up my presentation. I don't have the time that you seem to think I have in order to apply these design principles that I haven't even learned. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like to, number one, convince you that design principles are a really important thing, and number two, convince you that applying those design principles is about as easy as it can possibly be. So, step number one, convincing you that this is important stuff. So why is design important? Well, there's a very clear distinction between design and decoration. When you talk about design, what you're talking about is using color and line and proximity and other things like that to communicate information. When you talk about decoration, you're just talking about making something prettier for the sake of making it prettier. It's a very, very different idea. So when we talk about design, we're not talking about, oh, what does this color go with my eyes or anything like that. What we're talking about is there something that I can do to help better communicate to my audience exactly what it is I'm trying to say? And again, if you're not in the business of creating this presentation in order to communicate your information as best you possibly can, stop. Just don't do the presentation. I beg of you, I beg you, please do not give a bad presentation. If you're going to give a bad presentation because you don't have the time or energy to do it, don't give the presentation, please. All right, I'm off my soapbox for a minute here. Okay, so what are the design principles that are easy for us to apply? Well, the four basic pillars of design are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And specifically here on this chart, what I'd like to do is take a look at two basic principles, contrast and repetition, and how you can use these. So what exactly is contrast? Contrast is the difference between two things, and in showing you that there is a difference, you're helping communicate that that's the difference you want to point out. So for example, if you have a set of values like these 5 balls right here, and you change one of those balls' color to orange instead of blue, there is a contrast between the orange and the blue that shows you that there's something intrinsically different about that orange ball. There's something that you need to pay attention to in that orange ball. I want you to notice that I didn't go to like a light blue, right? You want contrast. You really want it to pop. You want it to do something interesting. So you want there to be a value that you think is important, that you want people to pay attention to, and you want to go ahead and highlight that value by creating contrast. Now, the other part of this is the repetition part, and the only way that you can actually get contrast is by making less contrast between your other elements. So you saw in the balls previously, the first thing we did is we went from multiple colors to all blue. By going to all blue, that repetition of that same blue communicated that all those values were the same. that they were things that you didn't really have to worry about the distinctions between them. And then we added the contrast after. So two very simple design principles, contrast and repetition. The first thing you do is you look at the information you're trying to communicate. And when you look at it, you say to yourself, what parts of this information are exactly the same? What parts should blend together? What parts do I not care about that much? So let's look back at this chart real quick. When I look at this chart, when I looked at the bullet points earlier, it said that it was really important to us that South America was really different than it was previously. And everything else was basically the same as it has always been. That North America and Europe were pretty much flat, it was no big deal. And that Asia was growing well, but it had been growing well for a long time. So those are 3 points of data that should all really blend together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and use repetition. Instead of these 3 different colors for these 3 different points of data, we go in, we grab the same color, and we apply it to all 3 points. Then we can use our contrast by picking up color that really pops, that really differentiates from the previous colors. We add contrast to our chart and we show somebody what the really important value is. And you see what the difference is right there. On the previous chart, all you could see was, all right, there's one that says 34, one that says 30, one that says 4, one that says 2. I don't know whether you really worry about the 2 or the 4, or if the 30 is a really big deal, or if the 34 is a really big deal. Now I know exactly what you're trying to communicate to me. You're trying to point out that 34 is huge. 34 is a big deal. And you did that by applying 2 very simple design principles, repetition and contrast. Wasn't that easy? I mean, honestly. Think about what I just did. All I had to do was spend 30 seconds thinking to myself, what is the most important element on this slide? I created repetition amongst all the other elements, and I made sure there was some contrast, some sort of pop with the thing that was really important. And that was it. I was done. Now, I hope that that kind of intrigues you, because if you apply an extra 45 seconds worth of strategy or an extra 45 seconds worth of effort to your slides, you're going to put yourself so far above the rest of your coworkers, it's ridiculous. Give yourself that opportunity. And I'll tell you what else. There's a very, very easy way to teach yourself this. I'm going to get to more design principles as these videos go on, but I want everybody to check out a book by a woman named Robin Williams. Not that Robin Williams, an author named Robin Williams. It's called The Non-Designer's Design Book. Go ahead and check that out. It's a really great book for helping to show you what the essential elements of design are and how you can actually apply those things. So that's it. Episode number 2 used the speaker notes from episode number 1, but then it went a step further. Instead of the emotional impact of pictures, we decided to go with the context of creating charts. Not only did we create a chart, but we applied a couple of simple design principles, contrast and repetition, in order to show how easy it was to actually communicate some real information rather than just throwing some charts on a slide and saying that's good enough. In episode number 3, we're going to look at the next slide, where we look at a process, and I'm going to show you guys how to use a diagram to improve this slide. Hope you guys joined me for episode number 3. Thanks so much for episode number 2. Again, if you want to follow up on any of the steps that I used in this presentation, you can always reach me through the comments down below or my Twitter account @NeilMalek. That's it from me. Thanks for watching, and remember, I want you to be fantastic at what you do.